I got the privilege to sit down with probably the most famous person in the whiskey world, Charlie MacLean.
Charles MacLean.
I'm Charlie MacLean.
Charlie MacLean.
He's written over 20 books, he's been in movies, but I'm not just sitting down with him, I'm sitting down with two of his sons, which might be the craziest MacLeans yet. They've decided to row across the Pacific. And whiskey is at the center of their story. This conversation was just absolutely wild. And throughout this video, we also tasted through some really interesting whiskies, including Ralphie's Whiskey of the Year. I decided to get them to try a New Zealand whiskey. You'll be interested to see what they think of that. You don't want to miss this interview. Good evening. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Festival Whiskey.
Welcome to the other side of the world.
Thank you for coming all the way from New Zealand to see us.
Thanks for having me. It's amazing and surreal to actually be here. I mean, in all my videos, I actually link to the Wikipedia. Called Wikipedia, and there's lots of good information, good stuff. People often say, well, which book should I go for? And I recommend to a lot of you guys that the Wikipedia, because you can just, a quick reference, you pick up a bottle, get a bit of reference, bit of a background. It's just a fantastic resource. So there's some context here. So you guys know Charlie, you know his books, you know his writings and that sort of thing. But yeah, the story about your row is absolutely insane and something you guys really want to learn about, because this is going to be some fascinating stories that we're going to learn today. But before we do that, let's learn about some whiskey. So we actually are going through a bunch of whiskies. We have Charlie himself here to help us through them. Is it kind of the concept is we're kind of following kind of a hot ones kind of concept where this will be kind of a longer discussion. We will talk about all sorts of things, but also be tasting whiskey along the way. So.
Yeah. Well, this is a Peruvian whiskey, and I've only just taken the capsule off, and I haven't tasted it. I didn't even know they were making whiskey in Peru.
I haven't tried it myself.
But my nephew, Guy MacLean, who lives in Perth, WA, he has a contact in Peru and arranged for this bottle to be sent to us. It's got a great colour. Look at that. Now it's called the black whiskey, and it's made from black maize, apparently, black corn.
So it almost be similar to kind of a bourbon in a lot of ways, being corn.
It is being corn, and it has that creamy corn. But how do you get that colour? Because it's so far as I don't speak Spanish, but as far as I can tell from the label, it's been matured in American white oak casks.
It's definitely got a cream soda, doesn't it?
Well, that's not that's a good descriptor, actually.
This is really interesting about whiskey as well these days, is that it's not just Kentucky, it's not just Scotland, it's not just Ireland and even Japan. These whiskies appearing everywhere around the world. And
87 countries.
87?
87 countries at my last
incredible.
count. And it's probably great, probably sort of 89 now today.
When you first got into whiskey, like how many countries were you aware of making whiskey back then? Like
5.
5, yeah.
5.
Isn't it incredible how it's become so global?
The 5 principal ones, yeah.
What were those 5?
Scotland, Ireland, America, Canada, and Japan.
And that was mostly for blend?
Most of the whiskey was made for blending purposes. Yeah, I got involved in this in 1981. The whiskey business. The malt whiskey was just beginning to take off, but it was all made for blending. But in the last decade, it's just rocketed.
Yeah, let's have a taste.
It's not bad at all. It's soft texture, sweet, quite short as you'd expect from a grain whiskey. It's quite spicy.
It's sweet.
Mainly in the aftertaste.
Sugar cane. I don't really know what I was expecting, to be honest.
Right.
It seems quite alcoholic, but it's what, 45%?
Yeah, apparently.
So, do you reckon they've coloured?
I honestly don't know. I'm loath to say. Colouring. Well, certainly in terms of scotches, that gives it a bitter taste. And this hasn't got a bitter taste. Until around 1990, they used a thing called Paxarette to colour it up, which was sweet. It's a very condensed sort of sherry wine. The blenders loved it. And indeed, it's quite interesting that a lot of whiskies that you taste from the 60s and 70s, blends in particular, and they have this lovely roundness, and that's a lot of it's coming from Paxaret.
Wow.
You know,
Interesting.
Paxaret.
not many people know that.
Right. Wow. I'm definitely getting that sort of, it does feel like a cousin to bourbon, like getting some of those caramelly, mapley notes.
I would agree, but it's
the corn.
not as oaky as bourbon.
Yes.
Because bourbon, which has to be filled into fresh oak, it really the key notes are oaky, and the vanilla and coconut. This hasn't got that.
Agree. Yeah, that's what it is.
It's a very curious whiskey.
Yeah.
But it's not unpleasant. It's very short and it's quite thin. It lacks depth. It's pleasant, but it's not. It's not complex. Yeah.
You guys are probably thinking, why are we drinking a Peruvian whiskey? That's super left field. Well, actually, it's not that left field. So, what are you actually doing? Because it doesn't sound believable. Just overall, I think you might be making this up.
No, plan is next year in April is we're going to row, leaving in Peru. So that's why we're starting with the Peruvian whiskey. Leaving in Peru, we're going to row right the way across the entire Pacific Ocean without stopping and try and aim for Sydney, Australia. That's the plan. So yeah, and it's rowing. Quite often people, they hear that and they kind of mishear that first bit. And they're like,
It's a big sailing
you're going to
trip.
sail. And we're like, no, this is rowing. You row through the day, through the night for about 120 days.
I've actually just come over from New Zealand. Actually, one of the longest, not sure if the longest flight anymore, it was at one stage, Auckland to New York.
Yeah.
That was a 15-hour flight.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is tough, going over the Pacific, me sitting here in this comfy chair, flying over the Pacific. This is tough. And then I thought, in my head, I was like, hang on, whoa. These guys are rowing over the Pacific.
9,000 miles.
9,000, as the crow flies.
That is equivalent to sailing or rowing from the south coast of England to Australia.
Wow. There's this angle of the planet you can look at. I've seen photos of it where it makes the Earth look like it's an ocean planet.
Yeah.
Because the Pacific's that big from a certain angle. But really, it's vast. First of all, I've got so many questions. How do you train for this? Like, how do you... and why go for something so big?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So 5 years ago, it'll be 5 years this December, we did an Atlantic row. So that was from the coast of Africa, and we finished in the Caribbean.
It has been magical and also hellish.
That took us 35 days, and we actually got to the other side, to the end of that crossing. A lot of teams do these trips and, they're fighting and they kind of have a very mixed experience, and it's a good experience, but it's probably not one they'll go back into anytime soon. Right. We finished that crossing, like we would row home if we could. We loved it. There were obviously bad bits and tough bits. It was a big step into the unknown. We hadn't done anything like that before. And the Pacific, it feels like another step into the unknown.
Yeah.
No team's done it non-stop before. Can we even do that? Is it possible? It's kind of something that's almost seems impossible, and then seeing if we can do it.
Have you always been into rowing? How do you get to the point that you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna hop on a boat and go across the Atlantic because that'd just be great. And then now the Pacific, how do you get to that? How do you get to that point?
Do you know what? It was actually, again, it was a whiskey related thing. Bizarrely enough.
Was it?
So the race across the Atlantic for many years it was the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge.
I think I just saw I think it was a thing on Facebook for the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge. This rowing trip across the Atlantic.
It sounded like this crazy thing that you're like, exactly your reaction, is that even possible? I've never even heard of something like that. And then you learn about it, and actually, I think having gone through it now, you can break down all these things that seem terrifying, but only because they're unknown. And I think the more you learn about it, we just got obsessed by it, really. And actually, it's an amazing kind of project to take on, because it's got so many aspects to it. You've got to build a team basically around you to do that kind of the media side, to help with the training, to You've got a big chunk where you physically, have to be very committed to the training, and that, like, you've got to understand how the boat works.
The other question I had is, what is it like when you're in the middle of the Atlantic, and I imagine the Pacific would be another level, and it's all you see is ocean, and like there's nothing
in the middle of the Atlantic. You're closer to someone in space than you are to another person on dry land.
So what's that like, sitting there in those nights? What do you even do? Do you sing songs or something?
There are lots of tough bits, but a lot of the good bits are those kind of tranquil moments. It's the sunrise and the sunset. Even the nights are beautiful because the stars are like next level, and the skies are next level. Just vast skies. We loved the state that put us into, and I think it is that feeling of isolation, feeling like you're on your own, and that you are sort of responsible for your own fate to some extent. And the simplicity of life at sea. Really, it's you've got to row, you've got to eat, drink water. Kind of the only decision you have to make is whether you're going to enjoy yourself or not.
I did have a couple of kind of just weird questions.
Yeah.
How do you go to the toilet?
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
What do you do? And there's 3 of you on the boat. Like, is it just
we will be taking a bucket.
Yeah.
Which is that will be our toilet.
We had a funny story actually about that. We were kind of at the start line of this race. Potentially it was going to be 60 days at sea crossing the Atlantic, and we'd prepared most of our stuff. We had the essentials. We had the essentials. We had the food, and we had the water maker working, and the autopilot was working, all that kind of stuff. And suddenly, there were boats leaving. They leave every 5 minutes for the 35 teams that are there on the start line, and it's every 5 minutes a team leaves. And I think they got about halfway through, and we were like, "Shit, we've forgotten the toilet roll." So MacLean went to this little shop, and then came back, got some
panic in this shop. I'm grabbing the toilet roll, and then
because you're on the clock.
And then for some reason get a bunch of fruit. So I got a mango and some grapefruit and. Yeah. It's like the last time I was going to be in a shop for 60 days.
And 4 rolls of loo roll. 4 rolls is definitely not enough for 3 blokes for 60 days. I don't know who's making those calculations, but we sent it back. We got some more, but.
So go to Maclean's Nose. Now, I have been involved with the independent bottler Adelphi since 1993, and when Adelphi built Ardnamurchan distillery 2005, I think, around about then, and I'm still an advisor, a nose, if you like, for Ardnamurchan. It happens that there is a headland that plunges down from the Ardnamurchan Peninsula into Loch Sunart. It always has been called Maclean's Nose. The managing director of both Ardnamurchan and Adelphi, Alex Bruce, he came up with the idea of creating this blend. This is a blended Scotch whisky.
What a blender is trying to do is to make something which is more than the sum of its parts. It's a completely new product.
Very high malt content. I think it's 60% malt, 40% grain.
Other blends often have a high percentage of grain, right? Whereas this actually more malty.
It's not really obviously malty, but it's and of the malt component, about 60% again is Ardnamurchan, which is very slightly smoky, very slightly West Coast, sort of saline. And it's also very reasonably priced, and it's now selling in 47 countries. It's done phenomenally well.
Very reasonable, and a lot of people online, my community and stuff, just love this stuff because it's just a great daily dram.
I'm so pleased.
And then even Ralphie made it as Whisky of the Year last year.
Happy to recommend. It's called Maclean's Nose.
That's right, you did. That's right.
Because it ticked all those boxes. It's good value, good flavour, and easily accessible.
I was about a month ago. A friend came through from Glasgow, and it was the middle of the afternoon, so the bar was very quiet. We were talking to the girl behind the bar, who was a very experienced bartender, and she knew that we were both in the whisky business through the conversation, and she said, it's really embarrassing because I've never got on with Scotch. But then she said, come to think of it, last weekend I was at a party and somebody gave me a dram from a whiskey. Wait a minute now. I've got a picture on my phone, so she brought the Maclean's nose. So then it was all self-used. I mean, it's phenomenal, really. But it's a cracking good dram.
Yeah. And that's come from, because see, I've never seen any sort of marketing from it, but I've seen a lot of people raving about it, just in the Discord groups, on YouTube, on Instagram, just as that hidden gem.
Exactly. Let the product stand on it, so you don't need to promote it. In fact, it's rather vulgar.
One of my patrons asked me to ask you if Charlie MacLean's nose were to nose MacLean's nose, would he know MacLean's nose, or who knows?
Would I know MacLean's nose, or who knows? Well, good question.
You don't have to answer that one.
I think I've explained it. It's Headland, not I don't really have. You have.
I've got quite good.
You've got more of a MacLean's nose than I have.
But then coming back to the row about why you're doing the row, we've got 2 bottles over here though.
Yeah.
And they also have the words MacLean on them. What are those 2 whiskies over there? What's going on here?
It kind of follows on from we were talking about Adelphi and Ardnamurchan distillery. Off the back of the Atlantic Grow, we set up a charity called the MacLean Foundation. It's sort of continuing on our work of fundraising for clean water projects. So it's boreholes at the moment it's just in Madagascar. One of the sort of primary ways that we're fundraising is Contagious, which is a branding agency in Edinburgh. They've produced this amazing, it's right here.
Yeah, show me.
They've produced this label design, and it's got a very unique wraparound label. So it's a leather belly band, and then you kind of unwrap it like that. It's got an illustration of Ardnamurchan Point. And then on the inside, the reason behind this was, Dad being the writer. He's written, how many books about whiskey have you written, Dad?
I'm on my 20th.
20th.
Published 19th.
Dad being the writer, he's got a lot to say about whiskey, evidently.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to limit Dad with a small label, so hence giving him a big canvas to tell the story of that dram. So the MacLean Foundation, we are independently bottling these casks, which are donated to the charity. And then they're being sold through Royal Mile Whiskies. Our Glen Scotia release, which is this one here, is currently on sale through Royal Mile Whiskies. All the profits raised from the bottlings are funding clean water projects. Both of these bottles will enable us to donate £60 to clean water projects.
Yeah.
And that will give 2 people clean water for life.
Because every single one of those bottles will provide clean water for life for at least 1 person in Madagascar.
That's what it's all about.
So why clean water? And why Madagascar?
For you'd been out to Madagascar.
The starting point with Feedback Madagascar was in 2018. I went out there. Spent 4 weeks there, and then off the back of it, that was when we decided to do the row. And so we knew that we had this thing that, the huge potential to raise considerable amounts of money. Feedback Madagascar, they do a whole range of different things, from building schools to school feeding to health centres, but underpinning sort of all their work are clean water projects. Because if you don't have clean water, you can't even think about doing any of these other things. There's so many, really amazing things that you could fundraise for, but I think that clean water is so foundational, and you need it. And in terms of the investment of how much it costs £6,000 to build a borehole, which will serve 200 people for a lifetime. Because this charity, for that £6,000, they'll then sort of maintain the borehole and keep it going for 75 to 100 years.
I think as a Kiwi, I take it for granted, the clean water thing, right? Because I don't realise that there would be kids out there who have access to clean water. You're right, it is such a foundational thing.
It is,
isn't it?
and I think similar in Scotland. We get in Glasgow, it rains, I think, literally 50% of the days of the year. It's seeing communities that don't have it as much as it is seeing communities with it. that really brings to life, you know, why this is so important.
There's almost this nice kind of, the meaning of whiskey, right, is water of life, and it's some sort of way actually.
Yeah, that's right. That's the connection.
You really are sort of bringing life through whiskey, like literally.
As you say, and to make whiskey, you know, the first thing you need is a really good water source, isn't it?
And what's so cool to see distilleries like Ardnamurchan and Glen Scotia to get behind this is really amazing.
Well, Glen Scotia have got all kinds of awards this year and last year.
Ian, well deserved.
Yeah. Ian McAllister,
the distillery manager, is a
legend.
Great supporter. He is.
Actually, we feel so proud because you've won Best Cask of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, over the last 2 years, we've won the world's best single cask.
That is some achievement, I must say.
My audience will know this, but every year a lot of YouTubers, we like to announce sort of our whiskey of the year, right?
Yeah.
And I think 2021, it was the Glen Scotia 15 for me, was my whiskey of the year.
Really?
Because every time I went to it, I was just like, wow, this is an incredible whiskey.
Yeah.
It just had everything. It had a good price. It had great flavours. It delivered some complexity.
Well, Ian and his team, who are all, they call them Toonies, the Campbelltown. It's Campbelltown whiskey, of course. Campbelltown was once the whiskey capital of the world, but then it declined until there's now 3 distilleries. Well, Glen Scotia continued, Springbank, of course, legendary, and then the owners of Springbank opened Glengyle Distillery, but now there are another 2 applying for to build distilleries in Campbelltown, and another 2 outside at Macleans, just not far away. So it may be, but it's enjoying a revival, you know. And it's so lovely to see. I mean, it's a terrific place, Campbelltown now.
So this is obviously a single cask. For every bottle we sell, 2 people will get Clean Water for Life.
That's
if you buy a bottle, 2 people
you can drink whiskey and 2 people.
Exactly. So for Christmas, you know,
you need a Christmas present.
You can give 3 people a gift.
And what's the percentage of this one here?
59.1.
What do these retail for? It's for the moderate. 115 quid. These are for drinking, but they're also collectible, quite frankly, as the range continues. You know.
I think on
that's an important point. So for us, it's very much a long-term project. So we want to be doing releases, you know, for the next 10 years or longer, and really, you know, with the whole of the entire of the Scotch whisky industry, or potentially, you know, other distilleries throughout the world. That's the ambition that we want to try and get to, and we really want to kind of keep this continuity of, you know, Dad telling a story about the whiskey. We're always trying to give at least one person Clean Water for Life with every bottle that we sell. I think also, you know, with Dad at the helm, the quality's extremely good as well.
So we started with the Peruvian whiskey. You're going all the way across the Pacific. So I thought, well, I'll bring you the other side of the Pacific, which is New Zealand. But you guys are finishing Australia. That's like another step. This is the Bog Monster from Waihi Whiskey. This uses New Zealand peat. You think of Scotch peat, that's the breakdown of like the flora and fauna over thousands of years. Well, New Zealand is a very different climate. It's got ferns and all sorts of things. So the peat actually is quite different. So this is a New Zealand take on what peat is.
Oh, wow.
So rather than being your Band-Aids, your medicinal, you're going in a slightly different direction because you're using New Zealand peat.
It'll be so interesting to taste this. 46% ABV.
But this is kind of a single cask range called the Bog Monster. But they are planning to release more of it. They've just upgraded the stills. They've got this new big. So they had a geometric still, and now they upgrade it with a bigger geometric still. So this is from the original still.
That's right. You were talking about these things.
He thought that you're going to get more copper contact from the geometric shape than the typical your pear-shaped still. That was the theory. Yeah. Any thoughts on this?
I'm not getting much smoke on it, I must say.
In New Zealand, obviously a hotter climate. The casks are breathing faster. They have quite a brutal angel share.
But it's not wood influenced. That's very pleasant. It's nice and rounded. It's fully matured. There's no off notes. It's got good colour.
Getting any bogginess?
Not really.
And different.
No bogginess.
To think this is a peated malt.
Perhaps a little bit in the aftertaste, but it's very, very subtle.
It is, isn't it?
I think they should up their peating.
So really, what do you kind of want people back at home to, take home about the row? What do you want people to sort of learn about?
Well, I think, if they're a whiskey fan, which I think most will be, have a look at the Glen Scotia and look out for future releases. I think the best way to kind of follow us, to find out about future releases, will be through the MacleanFoundation.org website. You can sign up to the mailing list, or you can follow us on kind of social media and all that kind of stuff. So the row on the other side, we're doing it kind of the three of us as the MacLean brothers. So that's the kind of channel that we're putting things through. So you can follow the MacLean brothers. Yeah,
so they have a YouTube channel. So go have a look at the YouTube channel.
I mean, around the time that this video goes out, we'll start doing, the plan is to do a series of videos in the run up to and during the whole Pacific row.
The way I often finish my videos is people use this as a slogan within the whiskey industry. I've seen it in the wine industry. I think it's a good way to sum it all up. But above all, share and enjoy.
Share and enjoy.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Share and enjoy. Slant cheers.
Cheers. Slant cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers, Dad.
Yeah.